Hey everybody, this is Josh Runquist here, and here is what is potentially my last episode of Backwards Marathon. I say that because I feel like I need to do a name change for reasons that if you know where I got the name for this series from, you know there's some kind of sticky situation, to say the least, going on right now, and I would like to not be involved in that. So, over the coming weeks, something like that, I am going to come up with a new name for this series. I'm not gonna disassociate, no pun intended, with this episode from previous episodes of Backwards Marathon, but I feel like I need to choose a different name for that reason. But that said, let's get into the Dillinger Escape Plan. 5 albums, 4 EPs, those EPs I'm not covering, which is why you see those two right there for the doesn't count section. And whoever made this list, I don't understand why you had 2 of their EPs but not all 4. That is very confusing to me. But let's get right into it with the debut album, Calculating Infinity, all the way back in 1999, one of the most chaotic and anxiety-inducing albums I ever heard at the time. Everything about this album absolutely crushes, and I just love the pure chaos that's going on here. It's a controlled chaos at the same time. Not something you would normally expect from a band like this, but it is absolutely insane, but it's so precision tight. And there's no better example of that on the album than arguably the band's biggest song of the style, 43% Burnt, which is the pure definition of controlled chaos. This, of course, is the lone LP with Dimitri on vocals, and he unleashes some of the most chaotic vocals you will ever hear in this style, and that is not a slight at Greg in the slightest, just Dimitri has a bit more of a demented sound, and you completely hear that throughout this album. It's short, it's sweet, it does everything that it needs to do, and as crazy as it sounds, I absolutely am going to give this an S. Miss Machine is up next. Of course, with the lineup in the band of Greg Puciato, who takes over vocal duties for the rest of the albums, unless you count this particular one, Irony is a Dead Scene, where Mike Patton filled in for this EP, and in all honesty, this is their best work, but I don't count EPs, rarities, and live albums, and covers, and all that stuff, so that's why it's in the doesn't count section, but if I was to include the EPs, Irony is the Dead Scene is their best album. Irony is a Dead Scene is the kind of EP that does not overstay its welcome and just completely obliterates you. But they needed someone to fill in after Mike Patton did his duty with that EP. I just said duty, and Greg Puciato continued on for the rest of the band and absolutely is one of the best singers of his style. Now with Miss Machine, it is so much less chaotic, but almost in a sense more chaotic than Calculating Infinity. I mean that because musically there is so much going on, but there's so much that Calculating Infinity is missing, and that is diversity. You would never hear a song like Setting Fires to Sleeping Giants or Unretrified on an album like Calculating Infinity, but it also wouldn't fit on that kind of album. And that's what I appreciate that Greg really brought to the band. He isn't just a frontman, he isn't just a vocalist, he is a musician as well too, and he came up with so many great ideas that the band just simply didn't have at the time. More diversity, a little more electronic moments. He really made the band a more well-rounded band rather than just being an extreme mathcore band. And arguably, this is the band's best album, and I understand why a lot of people feel that way. I'm not sure if I entirely feel that way because I feel like there's stronger albums, but I also feel like this is the watershed moment of the band. Like, everything changed with Miss Machine, and it is so damn good, and I am going to give it an A. Ironworks is up next, Chris Penny is out on drums, Gil Sharon is in on his lone album with the band. Gil is a great guy, by the way. I've met him several times, be it from Stolen Babies and also his brief stint with Marilyn Manson. The less I talk about that, the better, but he is a great guy, and you can tell the fun he was having on this album because he is such an extraordinary drummer who plays in so many different styles, and that's exactly what this album is. It is an extreme display of variety, and it might be the most diverse album the band ever made. I mean, you take a look at songs like Fix Your Face or Lurch, and then you also look at a song like Milk Lizard, which feels like the Blues Brothers on steroids. An absolute mastercraft of how to stay true to yourself and being diverse as possible. Something most bands would never be able to pull off, but the Dillinger Escape Plan did it on this one. And they got some huge coverage from this. Like, they were on late night TV programming, when they were on Conan O'Brien being able to do, like, Milk Lizard. And of course, the song Black Bubblegum, where Conan starts going in and he has the glow sticks going on and dancing with it. It's a hard to find video footage, but I recommend you go and check that out. That is some hilarious stuff. But this might be my favorite Dillinger Escape Plan album, and for good reason. Like I've mentioned, I love the diversity. It doesn't feel like they were just writing different ideas for the sake of writing different ideas. They wanted this thing to be as exploratory as possible, and for that reason, I'm giving it an S. Option Paralysis is up next. I will always remember the press release for this, saying this is the band's magnum opus, and I don't necessarily think they're wrong about that. I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but it is probably the grandest sounding album that the band has put out. And all you need to do is hear a song like Farewell Mona Lisa, which I think that should have been the last song that they ever made. Like, if they would have saved that for the final album and that would have closed out the album, that would have just been the perfect destruction of the band in the best way possible. But of course, there was a couple albums before that could happen, and it's also the first track on the album. So it kind of goes exact opposite of what my feelings are. But the rest of the album is just as good as that. They explore some more territory, but it's a little more confined, it's a little more structured, which can be good and bad depending on how you look at it. I look at it as a personal good thing. I think this is a fantastic album. I wish I had a little bit more to say about it, other than I feel like this is probably the most consistent Dillinger album that they ever made. They knew what worked, they didn't want to structured too far away from what worked for the band, and for that reason I do have to give it an A. One of Us is the Killer. What a fantastic album. Now, there is the argument that this is the band's lightest album, which I've never truly agreed with, but also, what is the lightest Dillinger Escape Plan album? Is there a lightest one? Because every song on the album is a different kind of heavy, and on every album, every song is a different kind of heavy. There's never anything soft and fluffy. If it's not lyrical, it's songwriting, it's the riffs, it's the production. Something about it is heavy in some way, shape, or form, so how can you really categorize something as heavy or light? But I digress. This has some of the most prominent songs that Dillinger has ever made. It's also strange because this is the album where I started hearing more people talk about Dillinger Escape Plan that weren't already familiar with them. Like, normies, I guess is the way to say it. Like, this is the album that probably had the most mainstream appeal to people. And maybe that's what people mean by lightest, because more mainstream people started getting into Dillinger, which I don't find to be a bad thing at all. But it's just a fantastic album. Whether it gets into the more jazzy moments, whether it goes into the straight Dillinger riffs that you know and love, it's got everything and more. And one of the best title track songs ever made. And I have to give this an A. And finally, we get to their final album, Disassociation. Disassociation kinda did feel like this needed to be the last Dillinger album. They wanted to go out on top, and arguably they did. I don't think there's a single track off this album that I would cut. Whether it gets into more exploratory, industrial, electronic sounds, whether it gets into more modern sounds, or it goes into some of the most bonker riffs that Dillinger ever made. I'm pretty sure they knew going into this album that this was going to be the final Dillinger album, and they wanted to have no holds barred. They wanted to be able to create everything that they wanted to create. They wanted to go out on top, and they truly did. And it's so weird that even the likes of Zach Hill, which most people know for the band Death Grips, I know him best from Hella, was able to contribute to the final and title track, Disassociation. Although it's weird, it feels like his input is shown throughout the album as well too, because there's some absolutely insane bonkers drum moments. Not saying that Billy Reimer can't play those, they just sound like Zach Hill played them, but I can't prove that. And maybe Billy was just doing his best Zach Hill impression, which if he did, kudos. But this album does feel like a long goodbye, one that you didn't want, but one that was really needed. It's the death of the band, and it needed to be that way, and everyone in the band is going off and done some great things, whether they're playing in bands and working with artists that they've always wanted to be a part of, whether they're creating new projects or solo material. They've done some fantastic work over the years since the end of the Dillinger Escape Plan. I got to see the band so many times, but sadly I did not get to see them on this final tour as they did not come to Minnesota for it. But I do wish I would have gotten to see them one last time in this kind of situation. And you'd be kind of surprised to hear it's not a doesn't count, it's not a D, it's not a C, and it's not a B. So I guess you can see how high of regard that I hold the Dillinger Escape Plan in. It's not an S either, but it is an A. Just give me a second to basically rearrange the A ranking, and I'll be right back. And that did not take much time at all. Let's go into the bottom here with the Doesn't Count, which is Under the Running Board and Irony is a Dead Scene. Again, you have two EPs that you left out. Why did you do that? Whoever created this, why would you do such a thing? But as there's nothing for D, nothing for C, nothing for B, let's start at the top, and now we're here. At the A section, we have Disassociation, which, if you had to put them in the 5 orders, I guess this is the one I would put at the bottom, but I don't feel there really is a bottom Dillinger album. Then there's Option Paralysis, One of Us is the Killer, and the top of the A section, Miss Machine. And then in the S ranking, you have one of the most chaotic albums of all time, Calculating Infinity, and one of the most varied albums of this style, and my personal favorite album from the Dillinger Escape Plan, Fireworks. And that is the final video under the name of Backwards Marathon. For the very next one, we will be coming up with something different. What will it be? And I don't know. And why am I saying we when it's only me? I do not know. But let me know what you think. How would you rank these 5 albums? Do you agree with this? Do you disagree? Do you want to crap on me for my own personal opinion? Let me know down below. And of course, like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. There's been an influx of new subscribers and watch views and all of these great things happening for the channel lately, which, since I've been doing this since 2009, and really starting with that drummer guy in 2011, and now we're here in 2023, I thank you so very much. It's very possible I might hit 1,000 subscribers now, which is so much harder than you think it is without selling out. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the short series that I've done with Backwards Marathon. Before I do some kind of name change with it, I don't know what it'll be, but the next time that I come back, I already know the band that I'm going to do. We're going to do something different with the name, and hopefully you'll enjoy it the same, as it's going to be the exact same format, just a different name. And until next time, for whatever this series will be called, my next album review, my next top 10 list, my next interviews, or whatever kind of video I put up here next on the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel. For Heavy Debriefings, it's Josh Ruckwith saying, see ya.